Another thing that you mentioned too is they started writing down Revelation or whatever, or not Revelation, but they were writing down the New Testament.
Right.
But from my understanding, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John started writing many years after the ascension of Jesus. When a crime is taking place, whenever there are witnesses, they want the witnesses to come, at hand as soon as possible, because over time you forget things. Certain things start to, come more addition into your memory. You start losing things. There's holes in your story. So do you feel like, 50, 60, 70, 80 years after the ascension of Jesus, the New Testament writings were compiled in I think it was at 320 or 350 AD?
Oh, no. You're talking about when church councils came together.
Well, that's what I mean, like Constantine, the compilation of the Bible.
No, Constantine had nothing to do with what was in the Bible. The point is that the New Testament documents were written down in the first century within the lifetime of the eyewitnesses, because most of them were eyewitnesses. And so I think you can show that beyond any reasonable doubt. I couldn't go through all the data here, but even elements of the New Testament, like 1 Corinthians 15, verses 3 to 8, which is an ancient creed that tells you what Jesus did, that he actually rose from the dead and he appeared to many people, including over 500, who Paul says many are still alive, but some have died. That creed right there, even atheist scholars agree, goes all the way back to the resurrection itself, between months to, say, 3 years after the resurrection. That creed is too early to be legendary. And that creed finds its way into 1 Corinthians in 55 AD when Paul writes it. But it existed long prior to that, as even people like Bart Ehrman, who, as you know, is an atheist who teaches at UNC Chapel Hill, and he's not a fan of Christianity, but he says, look, that creed is early, very early. So you have data that is later written down in the New Testament that's very, very early. It might be like if you interviewed somebody who was there 20 years ago and gives you all this data that they have from 20 years, and then you put it in the letter you're writing. That's still good data from 20 years ago. Just because you write it now doesn't make it 20 years old. Yeah. It's still coming from the source. And that's the kind of stuff you have in the New Testament. In fact, Gary Habermas at Liberty University has identified 41 creeds in the New Testament. That's probably the most famous one. 1 Corinthians 15.